Welcome into Dynasty Mode, everybody. This is the unofficial EA Sports College Football video game podcast. Arky Shay's my name. That is Demetri. Demetri, are you ready to get back into the meat of this game with some discussionary stuff?
I certainly am. I notice this must be a history episode because I am seeing our background, for those of you watching on YouTube, is LSU at Texas A&M. And do my eyes deceive me? But is there a Big 12 logo on the field, Arky Shay?
There is a Big 12 logo on the field. Absolutely. Good eye on you, mon frere. That was back when they were a member of the Big 12. I guess you probably understood that from the
I don't mean to brag, but I am I'm learned.
Oh, good.
Yeah, can you see both diplomas on the wall up there? That tells you that I recognize conference logos.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. No need to brag about that now.
Yeah,
okay, sorry. You want to see all the ones behind me? That's a curtain rod. Okay, that's cool. All right, that works for me. All right, today, you guys know how much we like to get into really the meat of the video game itself, and this episode is going to be no different. We did a previous episode on a little bit of the sound of the game when we talked about the actual broadcasters and when they were announced and what some of the rotation was and so on and so forth. But now to get even deeper into the sound, and I mean deep, we are bringing on a first-time guest into this here program. Demetri, are you ready to welcome in our first-time guest?
I am. First time for the show, but I've talked to this guy multiple times over the years. I'm a big Owen Good fan.
Okay, well then, by all means, you guys are probably able to read descriptions of podcasts and titles. You probably know it is Owen Good joining us. Owen, welcome into the program. We're bringing you into the stream itself for those watching on the video YouTube's version. Owen is joining us from Polygon. That's what he writes for. Owen, thank you for giving us some of your time. Let's get deep into this video game. Are you excited?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm excited. I'm as excited as you guys are to know more about it, when we're going to have it in our hands and that sort of thing. It's sort of, they had that great announcement and then it's sort of been like, so as far as the game that's coming out, I don't have a lot, to share, but I do know a lot about how EA Sports, EA Tiburon has made this series over the years. And if it's anything like what they have been doing, what they did, right up to 2013, I mean, it should be a winner.
Well, I do want to say that I'm wondering what it must have been like from your standpoint to have gotten an email from me asking about an article from 10 years or 11 years previous.
I mean, it was flattering to start that. I mean, obviously, everybody loves acknowledgement that their material is read and remembered. But I think it also more generally, I think it speaks to just the staying power that this video game franchise has and the hold that it has on the popular consciousness in present day. And I'm sure that some of that is because it's like the what could have been, the canceled, it's like the clipboard quarterback or the franchise that moved and what if this didn't happen, and there's some fantasy that goes behind that because NCAA football, it was a well criticized game when it was active, that's for sure, but it's also a well loved game, and I think that is been borne out in the decade since, and it's been borne out in the fact that when the conditions became right again, where electronic arts could do this, the way that people remember it and the way that people loved it, that they brought it back because I think it's got to be a cash machine for them. It's just going to be. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about this
until... Can I just sort of mention what the article is about real quick?
Sure.
And then get to you. Okay, so the article I'm going to be referencing, and we'll put a link into the YouTube description as well for you to be able to find, as well as into the podcast description, wherever you get the podcast, to see sort of this article from, again, a few minutes ago. Granted, I mean, we are talking about a game that hasn't put out a new version in a decade. But the article concerns how EA Sports gets the sound, the crowd noise, sort of to create the ambiance like that for the video game. And for that, Owen, you got a chance to run alongside, co-pilot with someone who's very influential with EA Sports, someone who I would say means a great deal to the franchise and to the college football franchise, and someone who I believe is still there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think not to be so mysterious. The guy is Ben Hallmiller, who at the time he was a producer. I guess he's been on your show a couple of times before.
Not yet. We're hoping to get him. Hopefully, you got an email you can give us. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I could probably get you in touch with him. But at the time, Ben was a producer for NCAA football at EA Tiburon in Florida. Today, looking at his job description, I think he's in business development, which may be like he's in the Sandy Sandoval was this guy at EA Sports, and he was the guy who had to talk to all the superstars, and he was also the guy who had to field all the calls when they were upset about their ratings. So if he's in business development, it sounds like he might be the dog catcher, so to speak, for dealing with folks who want a 100 and spectacular catch. But Ben is a veteran. Ben, I think, has been with EA Sports since he graduated Florida State. And so that is more than 20 years. And is certainly, I mean, I'm sure he could pop back into the studio tomorrow and get to work on their core gameplay team.
It's interesting. I mean, we're going to dive into this article a little bit because I remember the year, and off the top of my head, I don't remember which edition this was, but they were advertising that a game in, say, Tallahassee was going to sound and feel like a game in Tallahassee. And you outlined that, yeah, I mean, in some cases they went and recorded live crowd audio, and in other cases they just got a bunch of people in the room and said, hey, can you just go for a while, and we'll put that in the game. But one of the things that I thought about as you were saying, the sort of great what if, right? Like, where would this series be right now? I do wonder, as we think about, and I mean, this is for both of you really, as we think about some of the great what ifs in college sports history. I mean, the one that stays with me is, what if Rich Rodriguez doesn't change his mind and Nick Saban never ends up at Alabama? How big is what if Ed O'Bannon never files this case? Like, that is gigantic. That is a huge difference maker, I think, not just for this game and for fans. I think it's a difference maker for where the sport's national standing is right now.
I agree. I mean, and Arky, I don't mean to talk over you there. I'm sure you've got feelings about it too, but you know, the business, excuse me, the content model that NCAA football had was just plainly incompatible with, you know, the things that have happened in the decades since. I mean, it is right there. You know, the game that we all love, if you care about the fairness to athletes and them being able to, you know, make some money, at least in publicity, off of what they do, then the old model of NCAA football had to fall. And that's tough because there were a lot of people who lost their jobs. But, you know, Demetri, I do think you're right, because it is somewhat happenstance that it comes down to Ed O'Bannon, who, you know, he was a senior in 1995 when there was no college basketball video game, and there was no college basketball video game after 2009. But because, you know, EA sneaked him into the roster under some, you know, old shady practices, which they admitted to, you know, got this lawsuit filed. But I will say that there were two others filed. I believe Sam Keller, wasn't he a Nebraska, Nebraska quarterback. And there was another guy, actually, maybe it wasn't Sam, it was some other guy from Rutgers. There were others who were in this, and then those suits got combined. But Ed O'Bannon is definitely the big name, because Ed O'Bannon was, you know, tournament MOP and all that other stuff. So
I think one of them was an Arizona State quarterback too, if I'm not mistaken. That was sort of in these combined, sort of what would eventually sort of meant several settlements that ended up being for what EA Sports and the NCAA had to atone for. I do kind of find it funny, and then we'll get into the article, that it took Ed O'Bannon, that guy, the one time being like, that kind of looks like me. And then that's how the NCAA
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the story not even that Ed O'Bannon said, hey, that guy looks like me, but someone said, hey, my kid is playing the college basketball video game, and I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be you?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how it came to his attention, but I mean, it was definitely a problem for Electronic Arts because, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but Madden, especially in the first half of the aughts that decade, they would have historic teams, and I remember
Right.
the 1982 Chargers were in there, and it was the same arrangement. QB number 14. Actually, he wasn't 14. He was like 11 or something. But he was a guy who had a beard. He was from Oregon. He was 6'3", and he could really throw it well. You knew that was Dan Fouts, and you knew who Wes Chandler was and Chuck Muncie was, and et cetera. And that's what they were doing with these classic teams, which I think was in NCAA basketball 07, or maybe it was one of the last ones that was named March Madness. And it was like, hey, here's the 95 UCLA Bruins with Tyus Edney and Ed O'Bannon.
Yep.
Except they're not Tyus Edney and Ed O'Bannon. And somehow it came to Ed's attention. And Ed O'Bannon, I met him in 2013. And it's like, he's somebody who, I mean, he had a brief professional career, but he's somebody who is a success as a business person. At that time, he was, I think, in charge of a dealership out in Las Vegas. So he's not somebody who doesn't know his own worth. And you're darn tootin' when it comes to his attention that he's in a video game and he isn't being paid for it. That's going to go to a court. So.
Well, let's dive into the article here, because you talked to Mr. Hall Miller about just the travel schedule alone is really impressive to have created these, I guess you would call them real life audio experiences in the game itself. And you highlight, the area where I live, the area where you went to school, the fact that they were able to hit all three of the ACC schools here in the Triangle of North Carolina on the same day, because there are, they had different start times. Like, that sort of happy circumstance, I think, is a big part of what creates the atmosphere that it does. But now it also makes me wonder, like, I kind of not wonder, but like want to go back and play the game and listen to the difference at, Carter Finley Stadium, where they recorded real audio, versus where, they talk about having to do some pickups for Gainesville, having to do some pickups in Tallahassee, and just see if you can really hear the difference between that is in the stadium versus, we multiplied 8 people 35 times in order to make it sound like a real stadium.
Well, to give you the fuller picture of how they built the audio for this game, they did not literally travel, obviously, to every stadium, all 120, whatever. Nor could they. What they did in terms of actual on the field game day audio, Ben did go to a lot of places, but what was more common was they would find some college kid out in like Manhattan, Kansas, or Corvallis, Oregon, and they would send them. They would make the arrangement, of course, and tell them what they pay them. And of course, they get them into the game, and the college kid would love that. But they would FedEx them something that it was about the size of a phone. Mm-hmm. It's basically a very high definition microphone that has a digital recorder inside of it. I remember, what it looked like. It was somewhat trapezoidal shape, and you would mount it on.
Hang on for me. Is it this?
Close, very close.
Okay.
Had a bigger microphone at the top. That was an all-direction thing. It wasn't round, but anyway. And
that's a video YouTube moment, by the way, if you want to go.
That's right. We're plussing it for the people.
You would mount it on the end of a monopole, like, if you were shooting, still camera photography, and basically just stand there and just capture audio. You didn't have to log it or say, okay, the crowd is now chanting Tar Heels or whatever. You would just stand there and just record it. Because they really wanted authentic ambience. And so that is, and if for example, Kansas State, I don't know what their specific chants are, but they could get that would be fine to record that and put it in the game. What wasn't fine was, incidentally, anything the marching band did, because that actually comes in under performance and copyright law in the United States. If they don't have an agreement with the marching band, and they didn't, because those things would just be hellacious to negotiate, not to negotiate, but just the paperwork. So, you would have to strip a lot of that out. And so it's like, Ben was talking about how he would be at, Clemson, or he would be in Tennessee, and he'd get some great crowd audio, and then Rocky Top fires up, and they can't use Rocky Top. They can't use Rocky Top as played by the Tennessee band at that game.
Right.
But what they would do, and this is one of my favorite details about the game, NCAA football, and everybody knows the menu music, and you hear all the school's fight songs. I mean, it's like, I know Arkansas's fight song by heart because of NCAA football. Wyoming, great fight. Wyoming's a great fight song. Those were recorded by a military band in Russia. In a studio out in Russia. They hired a brass military band, and they sent them all the sheet music and said, play this stuff. And so that's how they got most of those fight songs in the game. Now, there are some, I'm sure people remember, there's some of the audio sounds different, and that's because they actually did go to the trouble of getting an arrangement or permissions with the school or its band. But most of that audio came from some military band in Russia. And then finally, I'm sure everybody remembers the crowd chants. And they were generic things like overrated and stuff like that. But you also had, the tomahawk chop down at Florida State. You had, I'll get back to something else in a second. I was going to say Ole Miss, but I forgot. But they went out, the developers went out at EA Tiburon at their old studio, and they went to the parking deck because they were in this office park in Maitland, Florida. Yeah. And they would go to this parking deck. I guess the second level or something, because the acoustics were a little bit better there to create a bigger effect. And they'd have like 12 guys out there, and they would chant whatever they were told to chant, hook 'em horns or whatever. Ben said that he specifically, Ben is a Florida State graduate, and he specifically opted out when they said, chant, "It's great to be a Florida Gator." And there was another guy there from who went to Nebraska. And so when they wanted to do Boomer Sooner, he was like, "Nope, I'm out," and refused to do that too. So they had to come up with some hacks to get this stuff into the game. But yes, they were very committed to, putting people on the field, and it's like, here you are, and now you can tell the difference between a very large stadium like Carter Finley and, frankly, one of the smaller stadiums like Wallace Wade. And when we were there, this is before it was renovated. But even that has an interesting and a little bit more intimate setting to me, or at least it did. It was very memorable in my case.
It's just real quick, Arky. I just want to say, like, it is totally believable, the parking garage story, because if you, and Owen, I'm sure you have, but for listeners, for Arky, if you've never seen where Tiburon Studios were, like, it is so remarkably unremarkable, right? That yeah, I mean, it just looks like probably next door they are, shipping springs across the country to build bed frames.
That's a side gig, right? Like that's the, you gotta have two hustles.
EA Sports is also in the spring business.
Yeah, okay. Doesn't make sense for their Tiburon Shark, but whatever. Like, nothing has to make sense to me. I do appreciate Ben's commitment to school over career when choosing not to do his grade to be a Florida Gator. My question is, why Russian military band? Like, was there nothing else that they were able to do here? Like, we have military bands. Marching bands throughout the entire country, high school, college, whatever.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, like, Owen, I don't know if you know where this rumor came from, but for years I heard they would alternate between the HBCU bands in Florida, Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M. Obviously, that's not true, though.
I can't. All of this, of course, is secondhand. This is stuff that Ben told me, and we laugh about it. So I know that a Russian military band recorded at least some of these songs, and obviously they didn't do it every year. So maybe they started with one type of band and then they moved to another. And the only thing I'd say about why Russia as opposed to somewhere else is cheaper development, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure that it would cost a pretty penny to get the president's own United States Marine Corps marching band to do some of this stuff. But, expedience, cost, whatever, is probably why they did that. But yeah, I think that I have heard that they got, the HBCU bands, FAMU and those guys especially, to do some of this stuff. But, I think there might also have been just something just weird about asking bands to do some other, school's fight song. I mean, really, it is kind of, I don't know how I'd feel about asking FAMU to, do Florida's fight song. That'd be weird. Do your own thing. That's what you're known for. It feels disrespectful. But anyway,
I've seen these HBCUs get down in a halftime show. I'm not sure what the limit is, like as far as the musical choice.
You know what? Like, Arky, you bring up a really good point. It would be a shit. Like, how do you get an HBCU band in a studio? Like, so much of it is the show, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, that's probably it. Is because you're talking about who can go to, where like an actual symphony would record. But you're talking about HBCU, NCAA and UNC had a combined show, and I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was it brought down obviously, because that's what people are there for, to see,
right?
As much as the football is like to see the show. So,
well, I've also read, because you've actually written about this in the past too, about the military bands taking control of the fight songs and some of the rights the NCAA and EA Sports, not NCAA, that's inaccurate, EA Sports or EA just couldn't get access to for certain songs for either a long time or for currently. And, it sort of makes, some of the universities that some of us either root for or eventually become a coach of in dynasty mode a little less a little lackluster because you don't get a song that you're used to. Or I know one of those, you probably see in the background, one of those for a long time, it may still be the case, was being able to try to get the rights to War Eagle, right? Like to be able to get that one for Auburn. It's just that I think you were the one that wrote that, like, there's some lady in New York that owns the rights to like War Eagle, and trying to negotiate that. She just wouldn't give a number that EA was okay with, I guess.
Yeah, the fight song is sort of what, for me, the more I dug into that, and this was around about 2012, 2013, the fight songs for me, I think, represents like the biggest area in which EA and EA's legal department, frankly, and the folks who are in charge of licensing just kick their own asses to get stuff in. I mean, it is an amazing patchwork of licensing. It was. And I don't know how far they've had to go into it now, but what the problem was that I remember in 2012, 2013 is, some of these school fight songs are not actually owned by the school. They may be licensed to play them, but for example, I can't remember. It's like Rocky Top. Rocky Top, I know was in the NCAA football game, but I can't remember who controls those rights. But obviously, that was who was the artist? It was a popular music song, a bluegrass song before it became something a Tennessee band would play. Baylor was a big example. Baylor's fight song was privately owned, and a lot of these were owned by basically a music rights clearinghouse that had them and more or less managed them like assets. And they were holding out on the licensing fee that they wanted, from EA, because they recognized that this had value. And it was sort of in a blinking contest. And EA finally said, we can't do this. We've got to pay so much and spend so much. It also wasn't so much the money. It was the time and attention, I think, because it's like, we've got to do deals with the Downtown Athletic Club, ESPN, and the Citrus Bowl, and God knows everybody else, to get this stuff in the game. And if you don't want to give us your fight song, we have to move on. So that was some of what was going on there. But, college sports is very, very interesting in the licensing landscape. Obviously, the Oregon Ducks is a great example of that because their mascot is Donald Duck, and he appears with permission from Disney himself. And that's a whole fascinating story. That's a lot of fun, too.
I do like the where EA at some point has to be like, I got to deal with ESPN, all the universities, the CLC. I'll be damned if Demetri in Raleigh is going to keep me from being able to do this football game. You're out.
Right.
Go ahead.
No. Please finish up your story because
I said earlier something about the chants. They go out to the parking deck and whatever. And I said, and they would do like Ole Miss. And I forgot. So another thing that Ben told me, and this is really funny, Ole Miss's chant is "Hotty Toddy,
gosh almighty, who the hell are we?
Who the hell are we? Bim Bam, whatever. Ole Miss by damn." They couldn't put that in the game because it wouldn't bump it up to a T or an M, but it would get it would get a content descriptor on the E for everyone.
Yep.
Or the E10 plus for everyone. It would get a content descriptor for language and also alcohol reference, because a hottie toddy is
a hottie toddy, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I guess that explains why we don't have Rammer Jammer in the game either.
Exactly. And there was also I think they got in the game. But South Alabama. Now they did go to South Alabama, but South Alabama's chant was something like USA South in your mouth. And they were worried about getting that. But that went through. But it was, it's the kind of thing where, Ben told me, and he told me about this when we were doing the Big Three, tour of state, or what started North Carolina, Duke, and then state. And this was back in 2012. And he was telling me about it. He said, we were talking about it with the folks in standards, I suppose, the people who dealt with the ESRB. And it was just like, no, we can spend all of our time fighting this, or we can just send them something without it and get the game out the door, because it's also built on a year-long schedule. Right. But that's an example of just how silly some of this stuff can get.
I grew up in Mobile. My father-in-law was a professor at South. I have never heard that chant. I've never heard the South in your mouth.
Demetri, you have that South in your mouth?
It may have been. I mean, it may have been when they went to Division I, because the other thing that was kind of funny was there was a year when USA was in Division I, but they weren't in NCAA football, and it was basically an oopsie. And
interesting.
And it was bad. And when I say bad, it's not like it was malicious. It was just some stank on them. And EA, God bless them, they bent over backwards. They gave them the royal carpet treatment for, I believe it was 14. I think it was NCAA 14. They went out there. They did everything. They got stadium audio. They put the mascot in, all of that stuff. So
yeah, interesting. As somebody that has such a deep understanding of the way audio made it into the game and the hurdles you have to jump through, or that EA had to jump through to make the fight songs happen. How do you feel about the soundtrack of NCAA 06? Because I've said this over and over again. I think it's far and away the best soundtrack. I think it's wonderful that they did all college rock for one, but I wonder how somebody that knows the work that goes into it feels.
I talked with Ben about this exactly. And I feel like, I feel kind of bad. It's like, if we're talking so much about Ben, it's like, why isn't Ben in here? But this isn't controversial. I talked with Ben about this, and I said NCAA 06 had the greatest soundtrack.
Yes.
You had
the Pixies, De La Soul, the Clash.
Soul. It was, and he said it was a college radio station. That was the vibe. That's what they were going for. But it was something that would probably never be done again, just because it's like it was their one chance to sort of blow it out, I suppose. But NCAA 06 was probably, or was that 5? It was the renegade.
It was 6.
Okay, it was the renegade of the bunch, because I think that's when you had you in your dynasty, you could get put on probation. You could get sanctioned, and that was only a 1-year thing. So it's like you had to in Chase for the Heisman, or whatever they called it, the career mode, you had to go to class and all that other stuff. But also there was that thing where, and it was like when you were in your dorm room and you were looking at your dorm room,
your court board.
Yes, your corkboard, and you had your picture of your girlfriend. And the better you got, like the hotter she got. And boy, would that not fly today. That was kind of like NCAA 06 was definitely the risque publication of that series.
Yeah, we talked about in the previous episode when we were talking about sort of recruiting, and like that 06 game, you're right, that's really where they got a chance to, they did like a huge overhaul of the game itself and of dynasty mode and so on and so forth.
I was about to say, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that also where the coaching carousel began? Not the version that it ended up as, but the ability to be sort of plucked away?
That may have come later. I think it was a little bit later, but they had something like it anyway. Yeah, sorry.
I can't get over the fact that my mom could have bought me NCAA football with the letter M on it for mature, and I'd have to go through and figure out where the boobies were, or where the swearing was at and be like, what is this? There is nothing in this. Why? And it's all because you can't say hotty toddy, gosh almighty, who the hell are we? Flim flam bim bim. Oh, miss, by damn.
Of all the things that they thought, oh boy, we really shouldn't put that Ole Miss thing in the game. Shocking that it is hotty toddy.
Oh, actually, I think they may have gotten word back from the ESRB that it would be an alcohol reference, and it's not like, I mean, they were just like, shit, we put all the chants in there, and then they might have gotten word back. It's like, wait a minute, hold on, this is going to be an alcohol reference. I mean, they wanted to do all of it. I mean, you can probably rest assured that everything you have wanted to do to put into NCAA football, as fun as it would be, players getting arrested or whatever in career mode, they have thought about it. But then they talked to somebody who they had to do a deal with, whether that was a licensor or the ESRB, and they said, no, we'd rather you not. And they said, fine, we'll just put out the game.
Well, I'll say this real quick, and then I want to ask you sort of a wrap-up thing, because I want to forward think this just a minute. But like the NCAA has given its license of the NCAA for like almost the entirety of the franchise, and you're right, when they sort of introduced sort of probation mode, right, and you could technically have the NCAA as the bad guy like this, right, with all these violations for not going to class, or legitimately like we did one of them on a previous podcast. We're talking about one of the players was caught shoplifting or something like that, where the NCAA yeah, for real, and this thing actually went on for a few seasons.
James Peter Warwick. I mean,
but,
that's right.
But there were all kinds of things, which is the NCAA, the R registered trademark next to it, the NCAA as putting you on probation. And so, like, the NCAA said, you got to say okay to this stuff to be able to get it into the game. And the NCAA was okay with it at that point. But I want to move forward thinking with the new game. As we're sort of
hang on. Before you do that, Arky, I do have one question about what were the stories from, because you point out in your article, Owen, that going into NCAA 2012, they added a whole bunch of new, like, hey, we were there, we recorded the audio, a whole bunch of new real sound from stadiums. One of them you take time to spotlight was Penn State the day after Joe Paterno got fired.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What on earth? Like, what were the stories you heard about that?
I mean, the stories that I heard were a little bit more generic, and somewhat, the punchline to the Penn State thing is, yeah, we were there the day after Paterno got fired. So what did we come home with? And it wasn't
right.
It was either a very subdued crowd or it was a bunch of profanity. But the other story that I heard from Ben about just sort of the general collection of this audio was, he said, never ever wear anything that says EA Sports on it, and don't tell. And if he was sending it to a college kid who was doing it on a stringer, don't wear anything, because he said all you will hear all game long is it's in the game, EA Sports, and all this other stuff, because you're usually standing in front of the student section. I know that I was standing in front of the student section at Kenan Stadium, at Wallace Wade, and at Carter Finley. And I caught some interesting interactions between some, shall we say, lathered up Duke boys and their dance team. I don't think those made it into the game. But that was the kind of thing. It's like, stand there and be a passive observer and do not tell anybody you're with EA Sports.
I'm just thinking of an interstitial on a very Confederate flag laden card TV series with the lathered up Duke boys.
Yeah, having an interesting conversation with Daisy.
Yeah. So, what's funny about that? One time, David Cutcliffe told me that they had the phrase "Duke boys" like shot down to be put on like T-shirts that were only going to the team, not even to be sold, but. Who was it Paramount that owned the series was like, yeah, no, not unless you pay us, tens of thousands of dollars for that.
Well, I know back at State in Herb Sendek's first year, there was a movement, the student section, I think, called themselves Sendex Rednecks. And the administration put the kibosh on that because it doesn't really speak well at the school. They were, Herb had to go tell him, thanks, guys, but no. So, yeah.
The comeback should have been like, shit rhymes, yo. Come on, hell. Like, it's good. It's good.
We're college kids, damn it.
That's right.
Like they're not going to call us the farm school if we don't do this.
Yeah, this will turn it around.
Right. I don't know if you mentioned it, but Owen's referring to his alma mater of North Carolina State. Am I allowed to say that out loud? I can clip that out if I need to. But I have several references to it already.
Listen, Owen, as anybody that follows college football, right? It's not just the ACC anymore. I think people know how much you folks have suffered.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the sympathy. Really
okay, so
yeah, it's like, do you say this to all the fans of the Cleveland Guardians too?
No, listen, I wholeheartedly do not believe in curses, but after the College World Series a couple of years ago, I started to think, maybe.
The curse, and this is a whole other podcast. The curse came down from the UNC Board of Governors in 1990 in the Valvano scandal, and that's it. But anyway.
All right, I'm 100% in on this curse now. I only keep adding to it. Like, the NCAA baseball team was not allowed in this year's NCAA tournament, even though they had apparently a better resume than stuff. So I'm in. I'm in on the curse. I'm in on the curse being a thing.
Just
which
real
is
quick,
one of the things, by the way, that makes sports so great, especially college sports, is like, it kind of is true because other entities can control your fate like this. So I'm in on it.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to plug mine and Owen's friend Lauren Brownlow did a great podcast on this called NC State Stuff because we call it NC State shit, right? And it is the best documentation of every horrible thing that can ever happen to a single school that you will ever hear in your life. So go download it if you are interested.
Yeah, it takes a dispassionate third party like a North Carolina graduate like Lauren to make such a prolific catalog, but it is very sympathetic, and we appreciate her service. So,
all right, as we're winding this down, I do want to sort of forward spin this just a little bit. Obviously, what you wrote was about a decade ago, and you got a little bit of insight, actually a decent amount of insight from the more stories, a lot more than what I what I was able to read, which is why it's cool to sort of touch base with you. This feels like the return of this game feels like it's a major deal for EA Sports, right? That seems like a fair deal to say, and for everyone who's sort of been a fan of this. I don't know if they're set to make less or ready to make a little less money because of let's just say what they may invest into it, but it feels like from an audio standpoint, EA is going to go really as far to the walls as they can to bring everybody exactly what they want from at least at the very beginning, like from when you had your experience with Ben. They're into it, but like they're going to be really into it coming up for this next game. Would that be something I think it's fair to surmise?
Yeah, it's fair to surmise. I mean, it's also fair to surmise. I was down in Orlando at their new studio, which is in downtown Orlando, 2 weeks ago. And this is where they make Madden, but it's also where they're making NCAA football. And they have a lot more infrastructure there. Their motion capture studio is beautiful. It's bigger. More importantly, it's like right there. They're not actually like fighting for time to get in there. And that allows them to do all sorts of things, all sorts of presentational things. Audio is one of them. But I would imagine that this is going to be a production commitment at least as large as Madden, because they know that this is stuff that people watch on television, and that is their basis of understanding for whether or not something looks realistic, more so than actually like playing it, because how many of us actually played college football? Very few. But it's that relationship to the game through the TV, and that's why they put in so many presentational elements in the past. I mean, Reese Davis doing a halftime show and things like that. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that for college football 23 or whatever they end up calling it, but I do feel like at least in the cinematography and in the sound, in the things that they can really control alone, they can put this back. I mean, we're also talking about 2 console generations since the last And they're aware of that. And this is a console video game. It's not maybe it has a PC version, but this is a console video game. They are definitely going to try to do as impressive a job as they can, audiovisually, and with their presentation.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense. It's been like that decade. There's been so many advancements as far as the technology, not only to be able to do it, but another decade for us to grow up and sort of know what this, at least from what we would see on a television, like we would be presenting with our consoles, like what this should look, and more importantly, or just as importantly, sound like, to give us the experience that's going to make it worth, $70 plus add-ons or something, if that's what EA decides to charge.
And it's also like, what have the best practices become in the decade since? Because now, you look at Madden and they've got, Brandon Gaudin and Charles Davis in there, but they're recording their lines together. And moreover, they're coming in during the season. It's not just they record it all at the beginning of the season or in the off season and then it's done. So it's like, I would expect to see those kinds of production values, because those are the standard. You see it in NBA 2K, you see it in MLB The Show. You're going to see a sports video game as it is supposed to be made today, and it's going to be applied to a game that you last saw a decade ago. And I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it.
Demetri, you got any other questions for Owen before we let him go?
I don't, other than just, Owen, how great is it to see me again?
Oh, it's awesome. It's fantastic. I really appreciate the fact that you didn't wear a hat, because that means that my old shiny bald pate
yeah,
isn't the one that's on the screen. No, it's wonderful to talk to you again. It's always wonderful to talk to anybody college sports in the state of North Carolina.
I really enjoyed going back and reading some of your archive stuff, and now that I know about you more prominently, I'm looking forward to, I follow you on Twitter and stuff, and people should go follow you on Twitter as well. You don't have your Twitter handle listed on the screen. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle has a long story behind it. My Twitter handle is literally Dude Man Best Bro 1. And
Dude Man Best Bro 1. Yes,
Dude Man Best Bro 1 is a fictitious creation of a friend of mine who was talking about the worst, shittiest asshole player in NCAA football, actually, and how he would always throw slants, and then on fourth down throw a fake punt pass. And that guy was Dude Man Best Bro 1, and he said it in a very hilarious way, and I just sort of adopted that as my persona. So I'm Dude Man Best Bro 1.
Dude Man Best Bro, and I believe it's the numeral 1, right? The number 1.
Yeah, numeral 1. Dude Man Best Bro 1.
All right, Owen, man, I really appreciate your time, brother. Thank you. We will be in touch as this game gets closer, and we'll talk more about it. And if you're interested in breaking some news at some point, if Ben wants to talk to you to break something, you may want to give us a heads up, and we'll put you on the old Potteroo. How's that sound?
We'll stay close. Thanks a lot, guys.
I like the way you frame that as, if you have news to break, we'll let you do us a favor.
Yeah. Dimitri, it's about how you sell it, man.
It's Tom Sawyer, right?
That's right.
All right. So this is just you and me and Dimitri again talking. That was Owen Good. Appreciate him. Can you believe he is white? Dimitri, come back. We got to wrap the show.
Who would have guessed a guy with a screen name Dude Man Best Bro 1 would be a white guy?
Oh man, it was a shocker to me when he first came up on the screen. I do think what he brought out was fascinating about not only just the stories about how they were getting the audio, but also like how it seems like the presentation of this game, both visually and audibly, it feels like we need to be, and EA Sports likely would be heading towards something that sounds very similar and maybe even better, just because it's not the game on TV like the game you would see on TV.
It's going to be really interesting to see how you guys talked about all of the innovations that we have seen brought to just the way actual games are presented and what they can do on the game. I mean, I'm sure you saw, like, it's been all over TV. You cannot get away from the advertisements for the new Apple AirPods with spatial audio. Like, that alone is going to completely change the way you experience the game. You would assume by 2023, that is a standard for this game.
Yeah, I can't wait. When this game came out, I had no access to a sound bar or to the full ability to be able to get surround sound. Now that stuff has got cheaper and more accessible for people. Like you said, the Bluetooth ability for just everything, literally since 2013, right? Especially like all that leaps and bounds better than what it was before. Like this feels like, especially if you played some of the games that aren't sports games, like if you played some of the BioShocks, the Call of Duties, if you put your headphones on, especially, these things sound amazing. So like to
Yeah.
be able to get some of this movie like sound to where it is so, Dolby, whatever it is, right? Like it's going to be a much welcome thing. And if you get some good chants and maybe it's great to be a Florida Gator and it sounds great and like man, it gets me all tingly inside because I don't think I've played this game with sound on like an entire like just gone through a game in a
Yeah.
long time. So I'm really excited to sort of reacclimate myself to that.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that. I would be interested in this is I think where at least where I run out of questions is, he talked about all of the effort they made in terms of sending out those old Zoom microphones to have kids record in their stadium. And then, when they needed to pick up chants, they would go into the parking garage and take care of it. That's a lot of effort. And I wonder if all that stuff just disappears. Because again, I go back to, and this is just an example I'm using. I go back to something like spatial audio, where you move in the room is going to change how you are hearing things. You can't just create that necessarily. Like it has to be recorded that way. So all of these cool creative things they did, I hate to expect that they are now things of the past, but you would think they have to be to take advantage of the technology that exists now.
If they're not hiding amongst people recording stuff during the fall this season, then they're doing it wrong. I imagine they're going to be doing something like that to sort of insert some of this into the new game coming up. Yeah, okay, that's going to do it for us. What a full episode. Very fun to talk to Owen there, and a very good guy to have in contact just to talk. So he writes a lot of, his stuff on Polygon's all video games and stuff, but you can tell he's a huge NCAA football fan. And that's where it gets me excited. That's where these nips start poking out. You know what I'm saying, bro? Yeah. All right, Demetri.
Why even bother ending the show on anything other than that's where these nips start poking out?
Yeah, but we have a phrase. So
let's
wrap it up to the next episode, Demetri.
Save and sim to next week, everyone.